Now we're into game number 1 here in the upper left for Berlin International Gaming. In the red, it's ShoWTimE.
And that, of course, means that in the bottom right side, we are taking a look at the main base, who's a proper veteran of the esports, or StarCraft 2 esports scene, and he even was around in Brood War already. We're not going to go full Polish Brood War legendary story, tasteless style, but we do know that this man has been around for an incredibly long time. It is Team Liquid's MaNa.
Gotta say, Roddy, you know, I'm glad you didn't go full, you know, Brood War story tasteless style, because I would have to pull my walker out at that point, and kind of left it in the shop. So
I've heard that story a couple times, man. There were so many great players in Poland, I believe, during the Brood War days, also in 2v2, and we can name a couple. But hey, the same can be said for StarCraft 2, right? I think Poland has traditionally always been one of the stronger nations in Europe. If you think of just pure Polish Protosses, I mean, we are looking at MaNa right now, but this could have very well been Christiana. It's been Gerald in the past, and then there are a few more like Papi and Rodzin, Art. All of them are pretty damn good. And we're not talking like, oh, are they barely GM? No, they're high up in GM. They are serious competitors, but MaNa is the only one who has made it this far. ShoWTimE, I think we can expect him to be pretty defensive throughout the series. I know that he's been somewhat fond of the double adept opening lately. It's actually MaNa who's going to go double adept here. But it doesn't feel like ShoWTimE to me, BO. I mean, maybe you want to disagree, but if I see ShoWTimE open up with 6 or 8 adepts and go double Oracle, I'm like, this is something that the guys that don't want to play normal PvP do. This is not a ShoWTimE build.
well, you know, Roddy, ShoWTimE, we know of him as this like defensive player, right? I'm just gonna go sit there and you're not gonna break me. I'm gonna get enough done, then I'm gonna kill you. And a wise man once said, don't know who it was, maybe it was Sun Tzu, I don't know, but a wise man once said that, you know, the best defense is a good offense. So if you're gonna play a very defensive player, build 8 adepts, because by that logic, Roddy, 8 adepts is the most defensive thing that you can possibly do.
I know that Johan Cruyff said it as well in Dutch, but I highly doubt that you were thinking of him.
I am not that cultured, Roddy.
No. One of the best football players of all time, but way before yours and even my time. I know that's hard to believe. People seem to think that I've been around for the last 48 years, but no, Johan Cruyff was a little before my time. MaNa is going to open up with 2 adepts. Oracle is on the way, as ShoWTimE has a very standard opening of double Stalker, double Sentry, and a Twilight Council. I was wondering if MaNa was going to go like mass adepts as well, kind of the build that we were alluding to, that I've seen ShoWTimE do quite often. That is not the case. This can still find some potential, but it's super nice for ShoWTimE that he, I think, has already scouted this properly at this point. He knows about the Stargate, he knows about the Nexus, and now it just all comes down to making sure your units are in the right position.
Yeah, not only is he scouted the Stargate, by the way, he also sees that, yes, there's an Oracle on the map, knows about the timing on the Oracle, and just, he is well prepared for whatever is going to happen. But Roddy, as we see what's happening here, right, and we see you talk about the Adept opening, I feel, and again, I don't play Protoss, so I haven't seen this as much, but I feel that with the Sentry change, you know, that there is power has been removed from those the Adept opening, because while Sentries are no longer really a threat, you can actually get damage off the shields of the Adepts and make that happen fairly quickly. But, you know, again, we're done talking about that for now. And MaNa, well, he's got his Twilight done. He's going to get his Blink on the way. It's a little bit slow. Maybe he drops Chronos into it and catches right back up. But for right now, you're talking about this, because this has been scouted, all the opening from MaNa, the Adepts, the Oracles, all of that really hasn't done anything yet.
Not yet. No, yet I think is the key word there, since MaNa actually added a 3rd and 4th gateway very quick. I'm starting to believe that he just wants to build a gateway, or maybe even 2 gateways on the other side of the map, and he's probably going to try to all-in ShoWTimE. And that's where maybe you can still get good value out of the Oracles, out of the Adepts, because if you're ShoWTimE, you're going to leave a couple units behind in the main, you're going to leave a couple units in the natural, and if you then forced to take an all-out fight somewhere else, it's almost impossible to match the same amount of units that MaNa can throw in your face. And I think on the top side of the map, we already have that probe there. ShoWTimE's Hallucinated Phoenix is so damn close to it. If he moves it, he gets the Scout of the Century. If he doesn't move it, this can still get very, very scary.
It really can. It also depends on whether MaNa, well, actually, there's a pylon. No, sorry, that's ShoWTimE's pylon. Maybe there's a world where a gateway goes down in Vision as well, and you can make that happen. But for right now, yeah, the pylon's done. We're going to see another hallucination go off. ShoWTimE is so close to this, Roddy, but instead he's got his third base on the way. There's no robo here, right? There's no solid defensive setup. This is just ShoWTimE saying, I'm going to get a third base because this is PvP and this is Golden Aura as well. I think he saw the large number of stalkers outside of the third base of MaNa, but that's about it. Is that enough of a tell for him?
I don't know. He has the same amount of stalkers, so I'd be very surprised if that was enough of a tell. MaNa is going to drop a Nexus as well, so this is not 110% ultra committed all in, but MaNa has potential here. ShoWTimE is still forced to worry about that main, worry about that natural, and MaNa is just going to try to force the fight with the Blink Stalkers. ShoWTimE is going to be very happy that he was wise enough to build a battery at the third base. I kind of feel like that battery should be able to make up for MaNa having 1, 2, or even 3 stalkers more. If ShoWTimE has a good Guardian Shield and nice little force field, I think it's going to be fine. He cannot move too many units out of position against this. MaNa with the forward blink, absolutely sending it. What are we going to go for? He's going to go for the sentries first. He should target the stalkers that ShoWTimE warped in there. I think that's a little mistake by ShoWTimE. You cannot warp stalkers in range of your entire opponent's army, because MaNa still has a few more units. Has already killed 11 probes as well, and this has already been a great attack. But you know what? There's really no reason for MaNa to slow things down. MaNa can do this all over again, and that second wave BO might even be more scary than the first.
Right, it's 5 gates to 3 as well, so not only is MaNa just having more stuff at the moment, the longer this goes, the more he'll have and just gets on top. Overcharge is a problem, but he's got enough stalkers to one-tap, so who cares? The overcharge isn't doing anything at this point. ShoWTime's just dead in game 1. We talked about lower bracket PvP, about MaNa being upset-minded. Well, it's working out for him here. It's a 30 supply lead. Yeah, MaNa, look at that timing.
He is more than that. MaNa gets the job done, and I think denying that hallucinated Phoenix Scout into the main was actually insanely good. Because if ShoWTimE would have seen that those 4 gates were already done, meanwhile he was working with way less gates, he's like, whoa, wait a minute. And then I think all the dots connect immediately. Like, hey, why did you open up double Oracle with 2 adepts and you've been kind of chilling so far? You really haven't been that eager, that hungry to deal damage. And the main reason why MaNa was never that reckless is just because MaNa was always planning for the Stalkers to really be the deciding move, right? Deliver that finishing blow. And if the Stalker fight is even, then the Oracles deal damage. If the Oracles get denied, then the Stalker fight will be so far in your favor. So denying that hallucinated Phoenix Scout from entering the main, 10 out of 10. ShoWTimE getting a tiny bit unlucky with that hallucinated Phoenix on the top side of the map, right? If he would have seen that pylon, then you can deny that pylon. Then you also, the alarm bells go off. And like, could be DTs, but can also just be a lot of Blink Stalkers very early on. So tiny bit unlucky by ShoWTimE, but kudos to MaNa. 10 out of 10 build order. 10 out of 10 build order execution.
And by the way, shout out to Mapu as well. Somehow I'm finding an angle to capture the attack on the third base and the natural at the same time. I mean, there's a reason we hire him for these things. He happens to be pretty good at showing us what we want to see. So shout out to Mapu as well. But Rotterdam, game 2 is going to be on Oceanborn. It's a similarly large map, maybe a little smaller. You know, the third base you hear people talk about with that high ground can be a little hard to attack into. I was going to ask you questions about what exactly we were going to see, but no need. Well, wait a minute, because the game's ready, and MaNa, upset-minded, is up 1.
I like how you're teasing the viewers and you make it seem like he's cannon rushing or something, but unfortunately not, guys.
Nope. He's just up a game in the upper left for Team Liquid. It's MaNa. That's
something that people often do, you know, when they're just casually casting a tournament from their own, whether it's streaming room, living room, whatever, and they're like, all right, intro, wait a minute, we have to hop into the game, guys, something crazy is happening. Here, absolutely nothing happened. But I'm sure the people got excited, Bio. And you know what? You made me double check. I was like, wait a minute, for what? What's happening? But nothing was happening. In the bottom right side, down 0-1, one of the players that we really thought was going to have an epic run this time around. No Serral, no real Rainer, like half a Rainer. It was kind of supposed to be one of the seasons where he could take off, and he can still take off. But we are 2 maps away from being eliminated. It's a lower bracket PvP against a man who's got nothing to lose. Terrifying, but I believe that the wall can stand strong. This Berlin International Gaming's ShoWTimE.
So, getting on to Oceanborn, Roddy. It's a new map. Obviously, MaNa's sitting here up 1. I think Not too surprising. It's lower bracket PvP, certainly, but, you know, he's sitting here up 1. Do we see ShoWTimE start to break out some more aggressive options? I mean, look, it's only a 1-game lead, so there's certainly no panic here, and for now it's going to be a double gate expand on either side, but, you know, you talked about that 8-gate Adept Oracle type of thing. Is this where ShoWTimE brings it out? Do you want to do it on a shorter map, maybe?
Yeah, I'm sure that ShoWTimE is a little bit annoyed because he's like, oh, come on, I played the most solid, standard, safe, macro-oriented opening, and the reason why ShoWTimE plays something like that is because he is incredibly confident in the late game, and he's like, really? You somehow bamboozle me with one of these builds that I could be ready for if I would have just been able to scout it, and technically I should have been able to scout it, but yeah, I was a bit reckless with my Phoenix scouting. One didn't move, and the other one didn't actually make it into the main. So yeah, he is gonna go into the Adepts with the Stargate. Could be 4, 6, even 8 Adepts total, as MaNa might completely flip the script on us and actually go for a 3-gate Robo here. Can also just be a defensive Robo, right? And then we expand. But I'm nervous for these guys because I know how big these series are. I know how much this means to them, and it's so nerve-wracking to play a PvP best of 5 with your tournament live on the line.
Oh, look at this as well. I think MaNa's going to go drop a Cybercore, just extra block it. Well, we're going to have to see, but the probe is still there for now, and I guess, well, with it being a 2-gate expand, there really is no point at the moment. So Adepts on the bottom side, which means this is a dead probe. And no, it's not going to get a second one. But yeah, so this natural is untakeable for ShoWTimE for quite a while. So it's going to be these weird Adept battles back and forth. The Robo's just about done, but again, MaNa probably doesn't care about taking his natural right now, right? It's all about the Immortal that's going to pop out, a Warp Prism after that, getting aggressive on this. And doesn't quite get the Cyber. Tries, doesn't quite get it. But ShoWTimE can be, you know, forgiven for thinking that this is a MaNa that would look to expand eventually. It's, oh, yeah, he blocks the Shade with the Shade, which is just fantastic. But because of how MaNa's playing, it's like, oh, yeah, clearly MaNa's trying to expand here. Maybe the mind games are working.
MaNa is actually going to expand here. That is, I think, good news for ShoWTimE, because dealing with an aggressive Trigate could have honestly been very gnarly. Like, maybe ShoWTimE would always survive, but then it turns into a weird 1-base against 1-base. And that's not really the spot you want to be. We only have a single Stalker and a Sentry there. I felt that maybe there was potential for that Oracle to dive in and, let's say, bottom left side of the Nexus. That's where you activate Pulsar Beam. Stalker would have a hard time really getting in range. Sentries are slow and can't really keep up. MaNa dodging a bullet there. Could be some of the nerves coming into play for ShoWTimE as well, where he's like, yeah, just don't want to take the risk of taking too much damage, misclicking, and not getting what I'm looking for.
Well, on top of that as well, right? You know, Sentries, they go as, and 4 Adepts into the main base, just barely. Probe's not there in time, and now Oracle's diving in as well. This is ShoWTimE saying, yeah, you know what? You got damage to me in game number 1. Let's make it worse. And it's 8 probes, 9 probes going down here. Oracles still exist. They can dive in from another angle. This is disastrous for MaNa in this game number 2. He's not. Oracles don't do bonus damage to Sentries anymore. He's not going to knock that one down. But 13 workers off a 30 worker economy.
What do you say about a second battery now on the low ground if you're ShoWTimE? I know that it may seem like a plap move, but I would say at this point you always get a second battery, and ShoWTimE says, I don't care if it's a plap move, I am going to get a second battery because I have dealt a devastating amount of damage. I am still going to go for it. I think he realized that MaNa was almost immediately going to send it, and I love the defensive Phoenix as well, because you think MaNa's army is more powerful than ShoWTimE's army, right, in a straight-up fight. It is, until you live the Immortal, and then it isn't.
Well, you know, Roddy, have you heard of 4 Sentries? They strip shields down. There's shield batteries and there's overcharge. It's not going to make that much of a difference. But I do love those defensive Phoenix. You're right, getting 2, 3 of them. It means you can start to put pressure. Oh, Warp Prism into thinking about elevatoring into the main base here. This doesn't feel all that great. He's going to go for it anyways. Force field on the ramp, but the Warp Prism, this is a one-way trip, Roddy. So there are 2 Sentries and an Immortal in the main base. That's not how you want to do this.
Nope, because now the Immortal is going to get lifted. MaNa is still going to be forced to fight on the low ground in range. There's no way for MaNa to really get the rest of these units into the main. He could drop another force field and then maybe keep some of ShoWTimE's units outside of his own natural. But MaNa is down 20 workers. He really has no time for all this nonsense, right? Recalling units, dropping a force field, waiting for an overcharge. MaNa has no time for this. MaNa is simply dead. He knows it as well. He's obviously going to try and see, will ShoWTimE do something incredibly derpy, incredibly silly? The answer is no. The Oracles, by the way, are going to show up one more time in the base. Activate Pulsar Beam. MaNa's going to go from 14 probes all the way down to 5. And that will do it, Bio.
I like how confident you are about exactly how many workers he's going to go down to. It's like, it's not 9, say. It's not going to be 8. No, it's going to be exactly 5 probes. And, you know, for now, it's 5 workers going down. This army of MaNa is still somewhat scary. The Phoenix aren't really getting the list that they want. Probes are starting to go down here. And while I'm not exactly a believer just yet, there is no overcharge available. A lot of probes are dead here. It's an immortal. Stalkers are still fighting. There's the overcharge. But the Phoenix, they're not getting that lift, so they're kind of dead supply.
He's fine, BO. He's fine. Don't do it. Don't give the MaNa fans hope there. He is. There really is nothing that MaNa can do here. By the way, he did go down to 5 workers, exactly how I predicted. I gotta say, I'm kind of impressed by that call myself. I was like, you know, throw the random numbers, see if it sticks. MaNa indeed went down from 14 all the way down to 5 probes. He's got 9 army supply left. And yes, that fight was somewhat close, but he will just never have reinforcements. This is some serious copium, by the way, firing up 2 probes. And normally I'd be like, that's a little bit silly, but these are the ESL Masters, the Spring Europe Regionals. The prize money is massive. I understand that you always want to try, but I think even MaNa knows that, like, yeah, from 5 probes, we're just simply not going to make a comeback against D-Mauer. This was an incredibly important game for ShoWTimE because it's scary, it's nervous. You're down 0-1, lower bracket. You open up with something that you've practiced a lot with, but it's still not really your bread and butter, right? The adapts, the oracles, it feels a bit hit or miss against certain potential one-base all-ins that could hit you. And the moment that those 4 adapts actually shaded into the main, I think ShoWTimE's perspective on the entire world just changed. And he's like, whoo, sun is shining. Clouds are gone. I know how this game is going to end. And he had to work for it, BO, but obviously that was a dream start.
Yeah, I mean, you go and what was it, like 13 probes, I think, going down to the first blush off of 30. You cut your opponent's worker economy in half. You lose like a couple adepts for it. Yeah, no, you feel very, very good about that game. And, you know, like, to MaNa's credit, at the end, you're like, okay, look, I just got a lot of probes. Maybe there's some equivalency here. And then you start to realize that, no, there is absolutely nothing. I am very dead. We're going to go into game 3. But hey, you know what? Again, you talked about this, Roddy. This is lower bracket PvP. Things get wild. ShoWTimE maybe playing something he's a little bit less comfortable with. We're going to have to find out. But Alcyone is going to be our 3rd map. It's it's probably the most, it's weird to call Alcyone the standard map, but it's probably the most standard map we have. Is that fair to say?
Yes, but I think Golden Aura and Oceanborn also not too crazy, right? We don't have weird in-base expand. We don't have too many mineral walls to worry about. So I would say that the first 3 in total have been quite standard. And that doesn't surprise me. When you have 2 honest, sweet European Protoses, 2 veterans, it makes sense that they want to start things off on the old maps. Let's do it. Bottom left side, our German Protoss, who had a lucky break there with the adepts actually making it into the main base. And at that point, I think he knew immediately, this game is mine. It's BIG's, it's ShoWTimE.
And his opponent in the upper right, inches away, centimeters away from going and getting a pylon block and actually playing the game the way you wanted to play. For Team Liquid, it's MaNa.
What I sometimes enjoy, BO, is theory crafting over games that did not happen at all, just to maybe get past the first minute. But we'll keep an eye on the production tab and we'll see what these nerds are planning and if they want to do something weird or cheeky or not. How do you think that game goes if MaNa just goes 3-gate robo of 1 base?
I mean, I don't even think that's the real question. I think the real question is, how does that game go if the pylon goes down? Because, you know, 3-gate robo, sure, fine. You know, I can like it against Stargate openers, depending on how it decides to go. If that is 3-gate robo, no immortal, so you just go for a warp prism and you get a bunch of stalkers, yeah, it's great. So good for MaNa. If he buys time for an immortal, then maybe, you know, you get a void ray out, you get Phoenix, and you get a little bit more complicated. Regardless, you know, it's pretty fun. But MaNa's got a pylon on the map here, Roddy. It's 2 gateways are going to be in his main base. Cyber on the way. Is this the 3-gate robo we were looking for?
It could be. It can also be a proxy Stargate. We'll see what MaNa wants to do. He's got 160 gas. Is he gonna drop Stargate? Nope. It's gonna be the Robo. Can also just be 2 adepts with a quick Warp Prism, and we're gonna expand from there. MaNa definitely does strike me as the guy who's put a lot of prep into this series. Where he's like, whoa, coming into this season, didn't really think I would find myself here. Top 12 of Europe. Something to be incredibly proud of. I am sure that he's thought everything out very well. ShoWTimE is going for the defensive role, but ShoWTimE realized, hey, I have 2 pylons in my main. You have 1 pylon in your main. Sometimes pro gamers actually count workers as well. I will always think back of our man Tasia, who once upon a time had a scout at Home Story Cup, and we're like, how did you know he was proxying you? Tasia was like, he had 11 SCVs in the main, and he should have 12. And we all look at him and like, you joking? He's like, no, that's serious. I'm like, all right. Guys are very good at the way is that MaNa mined out those mineral patches, and he's like, ShoWTimE, you should scout the entire bottom right side of the map. And then he actually proxied in the center. But this is not the first time I see this trick, and if I have seen it before, I just always assume that ShoWTimE has seen it before as well.
You know, just because ShoWTimE's seen it before doesn't mean he's going to be picking up on it, right? It's like, oh, okay, you know this is a possibility, but...
MaNa, please, MaNa.
Okay, well, he's got a sentry here. Adepts are going to recall back home. This should be able to handle this without too much damage. But the other problem is the Adepts are in the main base. They see where the pylons are. They see where the pylons aren't. They have a really good scout of what's happening. And ShoWTimE, did he see the robo? Yeah, he did. So ShoWTimE, 100% information. He knows MaNa's on 1 base. He got 3 probes down. He saw the robo. He knows everything that he has to know.
And look at ShoWTimE's reaction, by the way. He immediately sends his War Prism to the other side of the map. Don't forget that MaNa just used recall on those Adepts. And ShoWTimE says, you know what? I'm not opening up with an Immortal because it's going to take a little while before you arrive. Builds a War Prism first, immediately sends it to the other side of the map, and he's going to warp in 2 Adepts in the main base of MaNa. And that is actually going to be incredibly painful. Well, I guess turn out that we warped him in over here, but same idea, BMO. He's going to drop 2 Adepts in the main base of MaNa, and MaNa may have a spotting pylon. This is going to be difficult to deal with. Keep an eye on that. MaNa is supply blocked too. He can't even warp in any units. I mean, ShoWTimE is going to help him with that, but it's still very painful. MaNa's in serious danger here.
And he's got 1 Adept, 2nd one on the way, sure, but I mean, look, if I'm ShoWTimE here, I should be targeting those Adepts down as they warp in. It doesn't matter though, it's gonna be 4 Adepts to 2. So you talk about this setup here, Stargate. I mean, MaNa is developing a Stargate as well, which is a really interesting follow-on to this attack that he's going for. But for right now, he's losing economy, he's losing his defense for all this setup. The probes have to get pulled into this. So regardless of, hey, it's kind of cool he's getting a Stargate, you know, Roddy, that's kind of cool. He's lost 6 probes. His attack's not going to work. It's bad news bears for MaNa here.
I like the quick thinking of like, okay, if it's 1 base against 1 base, it is incredibly unlikely I'm going to kill you. It's also very unlikely that you're going to kill me. And then it often turns into the how many basic gateway units can you make? And then somebody goes Disruptors and the other guy goes Phoenix. It often turns into I Immortal drop you and you Immortal drop me. Sometimes people ask like, hey, I used to always see the double Immortal drop in PvP in Heart of the Swarm. Like, why is that not a thing anymore? It's mostly just because we always have quick blink and the economies are a little bit different right now. But if you ever find yourself in a 1 base against 1 base, robo against robo scenario, that's where you absolutely will see the double Immortal drop make a serious comeback.
Yeah, no, for now though, MaNa, he's just stuck on the middle of the map. I do like this, by the way. His pylon gets to power. He's like, oh no, Adepts killed my pylon. Whatever I'm going to do. I've got a Warp Prism, so I can go power my Immortal, get that one done, and now he's gonna have 2 Immortals to 2. There is that. You know, you talk about Warp Prisms and drops. That is now a possibility. We're gonna have to see exactly what MaNa decides to go for. But at the very least, right, you talked about this, ShoWTimE doesn't have that drop potential as much because Phoenix are on the map for MaNa. Now, Roddy, there was a style that we saw a Dutch, I think it was a Dutch Protoss named Cryptsale a couple years ago start to use a little bit more, which was Phoenix Immortal, right? Where you go, you get all your gas effectively, all your minerals go into Phoenix Immortals, and you have a bunch of Immortals, they kill all the Stalkers, the Phoenix lift the rest of them, and it can work out if you're ahead. Is there a world, I was gonna ask if there's a world where MaNa does this, but his robo is so far away and it's so depowered that that doesn't really strike me as something, I guess, that's not as possible as maybe you might want it to be.
Yeah. I don't know if you were serious or not about Cryptsale, by the way, but I don't think he was Dutch. As far as I know, he was Russian.
Oh, never
Small
mind.
chance that he was French, but I think he was Russian. We also have King Cobra, who's a big fan of the Phoenix Immortal. There's really quite a few. I am a Phoenix Immortal lover myself. But it all comes down to how big are the armies. Phoenix Immortal is incredibly good in small economies and when the army supplies are not that high. But the larger that people grow, the more rather you have, or the better it is to just have a standard army. Blink Stalkers, Zealous Recharge, Archons, etc. I think at this point though, MaNa probably feels that he doesn't have much of a choice. And he is actually going to go for a double Immortal drop combined with a couple of Phoenix. Very cool play here. Haven't really thought about it like this. ShoWTimE is going to be very happy that he has that shield battery from the early game. Blink is already finished up. So ShoWTimE just blinks forward. There are a bunch of gateway units that are going to run into the natural, but this was a cool idea by MaNa, but just a little bit too risky. But what he does do is that he drops a couple of insane force fields. ShoWTimE, however, is going to respond with the recall.
Yeah, and the unfortunate thing as well is you could do that with one force field. Instead, he does it with a lot more. So somehow, despite everything, because there was no target fire on the probes, right? They were just A-moved, and therefore shield battery was keeping things alive. Somehow, only 4 probes go down. That's as much as MaNa lost on the other side. Now, these force fields are going to be a little bit nicer, but MaNa, he spent all but 1, all but 2 of his force fields. He's been overzealous really with the force fields, and now that's going to be the rest of them. So you look at the setup, yeah, sentries, they do a lot of damage to shields variety. This is true. But a lot of the power of these sentries now, whether it's Guardian Shield, Force Fields, whatever you want to say, is now really not there. And it's really just a Adept Immortal Sentry against a bunch of Blinkstalker Immortal. The power of this army from ShoWTimE is theoretically so much more, but another Mortal is going to start to join the fray here. And, well, Phoenix getting on top of the Warp Prism eventually, maybe. I still don't like it for MaNa, but the flank looks scary for like half a second.
I think it's going to work out for ShoWTimE, but that Blink was almost one that he paid an incredibly hefty price for. But in the end, the Blink Stalkers are going to be too powerful here. The Adepts and Sentries, there's nothing that they can really do anymore. You can drop the random force field, but that's not going anywhere. GG gets called. ShoWTimE still wins. Got a little bit reckless there towards the end. He almost paid the biggest price for that forward Blink, because he probably sized that army up and he said like, yeah, a couple of basic gateway units, a Phoenix or 2, 1 Immortal. That's not that scary. But then right when he committed to the forward Blink, force fields go down and 3 Adepts and the second Immortal came in from the bottom. And at that point, I'm sure that ShoWTimE's heart skipped a beat where he's like, is this okay? And it just barely was okay because his army is just better, had more micro potential. And MaNa, if he had like 1 more Phoenix, then maybe he can dive on that Warp Prism. And if he picks off that Prism, there is a chance he wins that fight. But with the immediate reinforcements, ShoWTimE in the end was just going to have a little too much.
Yeah, you know, it's kind of cool, right? You look at how MaNa played, and he was in a really rough spot from pretty much the moment he was scouted. Adepts get in his main base, he takes damage, he has to warp in at home, he has to warp Adepts in at home. You know, just everything is going wrong for this robo attack. But then he builds Phoenix, and he tries to go snipe a couple units. Unfortunately, you know, there's a bunch more Blinkstalkers on the main base that are able to respond, so it doesn't really work out all that well. And then you have the force field and the natural at the same time that has a chance to kill like 15 probes and instead only gets 4. And then you have the flank coming in, and MaNa had so many opportunities in this game to almost bring it back, right? To do this really cool thing and hit the edge and start running away with it. And instead, ShoWTimE does the right thing every single time. MaNa doesn't quite get there, and that means that now that, you know, MaNa, he's upset-minded, but he's down a game in this series. ShoWTimE, he's on match point, and Rotterdam, as we're getting our way ready, it's going to be Ghost River. It's going to be a pretty aggressive map for map number 4.
Ghost River is another one in PvP. In the top left side, we are looking at the main base of the man who had some tricks up his sleeve with that proxy robo, mining out those mineral patches. But in the end, it just didn't really work because he let the Adepts get in, and then there were more Adepts in his main base. And he just fell behind. Uncomfortable game to play from that position. Representing Team Liquid. Already a great season. Can we make it even better? It's MaNa.
And the effort right, the man that we thought might make a deep run in the playoffs. And, well, you got to do it from the lower bracket now. He's up 2 games to 1. It's ShoWTimE.
You know what? There's a very big moment there. Is that he actually had energy for the recall. I saw those force fields. I was like, this is actually kind of sick. MaNa should be able to get a decent amount of probes here, unless there is a recall available, and then there was. Now, Blink was finished up, so theoretically Stalkers could have just blinked to the low ground. But if the Stalkers are forced to fight there without the Immortal, and you're forced to blink in, which means Blink is going to be on cooldown, and you lose your micro potential, that would have actually been really bad for MaNa. So, excuse me, for ShoWTimE. ShoWTimE got perhaps a tiny bit fortunate that he had over 50 energy on the Nexus in the natural, or we can say that that was calculated, but I'm not sure if that's really how it works, Bia.
I choose, you know, when I'm looking at pro players, right, Roddy, it's very easy to say, look, they made a mistake. I choose to believe this was intentional by design. ShoWTimE, our pillar of defensive macro plays, like, yeah, I know I got to be worried. MaNa's at a deficit. I got to save some energy for an overcharge, for a recall, just to make sure that I'm okay on both bases, because you never know what's going to happen. And it worked out. I don't know. Don't know if that's the case or not, but you talk about this map, right? Rotterdam, it's Ghost River. It is very close, natural to natural. It's weird in PvP. There's a ton of areas to go put a proxy down. If you're MaNa, you're back a game in this series. Your aggressive builds have worked, but not to the extent that they need to actually win the game. How are you thinking about this map?
Yeah, it's weird. Even though it is tiny, it's not a map where you can just walk a couple of units to the other side of the map and be like, hey, now I can just out micro sentries, right? Because A, those sentries, like you mentioned, deal more damage, and B, they just seem to always have a shield battery. The tinier the map, the quicker they build those defensive batteries, and then it still just kind of turns into a good old PvP. I was just still thinking about what you just said, what I asked you. Like, I am very familiar as a pros player myself with the idea of like, okay, I definitely need to make sure that I've got more than 50 energy here. But what I personally never do, and I would be surprised if a pro does it that early, is that it's specifically 50 energy on the natural. You know, like, why would that matter? Like, you definitely keep track of your next side, and you're like, all right, I want to make sure that I have an overcharge available in case I get attacked in the near future. But yeah, I wonder if ShoWTimE somehow foresaw a scenario where he would need recall in the natural, even though he was at home with his army. If that was planned out, he's a god. I think that was just a tiny bit fortunate.
I mean, look, Roddy, if there's one thing that we've learned over the course of this first series today, it's that high-level Protoss players are kind of fortune tellers. What was it, game 2? We saw you go and you say, look, MaNa's going to be on 5 probes after this harass, and guess what? He went down to 5 probes. ShoWTimE said, I need 50 energy at my natural, and guess what? He had 50 energy at his natural. So clearly, you know what, Roddy, it makes sense. As a Protoss player, you can make oracles. The amount of games that you play as a Protoss player to get to the level that you, or even more ShoWTimE is, you build a lot of oracles. It's got to rub off, right?
Yeah, perhaps there is something to it. ShoWTimE is going to build a 3rd gateway, so it's a 2-gate expand with a Twilight, and how he builds a 3rd gate, probably because he feels that he just needs a few more units. As MaNa open up with the Robo, but just because they have an expand and they open up with the Robo, that doesn't mean that they won't attack you. There are these tiny windows sometimes available for just a couple sentries and a single immortal to truly cause a world of pain. I feel like ShoWTimE's got a very good read on the situation. Already moved the units out first to theoretically drop a force field on a ramp if he feels that it would be the right play. And if that's not the play, well, then we just send them back. We've got a battery. He's going to get a 2nd battery. ShoWTimE knows his army's out there. It's like, I can smell it. I just don't really know where it's coming from. And now it's going to show up on the minimap. I don't think MaNa's going to get too much done here, though.
Not yet, but he does have 2 more gateways on the way, so eventually this is going to be a 4-gate coming in. The force fields are doing a decent job. Sentries going down both sides. And by the way, Rotterdam is waiting for this fight to properly develop. I love that you can move across the map with like 4 sentries and an immortal. And with the buffs to sentries, that's actually a reasonable fighting force. So for right now, more force field's going to go down. There's an overcharge there that's getting stripped down pretty quickly. But now Stalkers just get on top of the Warp Prism, and that is the end of this push. Immortals are dead. There's a 2nd one that's going to show up, but it does not want to be here, Roddy. Not at all. The blink timing from ShoWTimE is absolutely what it needed to be, and this push is dead. It's gone.
And that almost makes me feel that MaNa is dead, unfortunately, in this tournament. He is going to warp in a couple of units. He's going to try to get his own defensive battery and Chrono Boost out on Immortal. The series that started off so well, and it felt like it had some potential in Game 2 too. With the mind games, the proxy robo, the way that the build orders were shaping up. I was kind of believing it for MaNa, but everything has started to fall apart ever since those first 4 adepts in Oceanborn got into his main base. It felt like it's all been a D-Mauer who just needed his first little victory in this best of 5 to turn it into a never-ending string of victories. Because that's kind of what this is. MaNa is going to try here. He's down 6 workers. He's got an Immortal, but that Immortal has no barrier. And without a barrier, it actually dies really quick. As you can see, forward blink. I think we can safely say, Bio, that D-Mauer is going to advance into the top 8 of Europe once more.
Yeah, you know, it's funny. Game 1, MaNa won. Game 2, as you said, it had a shot. But at this point, it is just... Rarely do you see a PvP where one player looks so dominant. But MaNa, after Game 1, just hasn't been able to get anything going. Every time he wants to go and get aggressive, he hits a 3-gate robo, 4-gate robo, 2-base timing, whatever it is that he wants to go for, right? ShoWTimE scouts it. ShoWTimE gets his defense up set up where he needs to be. He's got the counterpunch ready. And for the last 20 minutes, MaNa has had like 2 minutes where he's been allowed to play the game that he wants to play, and the rest of it has just been ShoWTimE reacting, responding, and countering. So at this point, yeah, I don't really know what MaNa is supposed to do. He's got a Twilight on the way eventually. Theoretically, this is, you know, oh, win behind Dark Shrine, but unfortunately, there are already observers on the map, so that's not even really a solution.
No, this is one of these moments where if this wasn't such an important game, if it wasn't the ESL Masters, Spring Regionals, lower bracket, MaNa would have already been out because he would be fully convinced that he is totally dead. I'm sure that deep down inside he knows after that first Immortal fell, basically the moment those Stalkers blinked forward and gunned down his prism, he's like, uh-oh, this is bad, isn't it? But at that point, you can't really do a lot anymore. Maybe he could have gone for the immediate recall, but he will still lose at least one of the two Immortals. Now he ended up losing both of them. And this is a nightmare scenario. BO can't really spin it any other way. I'm sure that ShoWTimE is already thinking about the next round where he knows he will go up against the Protoss. We just don't know which one yet.
Roddy, hear me out here, okay? And this is a 3%. 3%er, so it's probably not going to happen.
3% is a lot, by the way, BO. I hope you know that. Before you continue your story, I want you to know that 3% is a lot. Think of 3% gains on everything you have. Wouldn't you love that?
This is, okay, so like 0.5%. But
okay.
MaNa's going Glaive Adepts. ShoWTimE's got charged. The way to counter, oh, well, that's another Dead War Prism, so 0.25% now. But if ShoWTimE said, that's a lot of Stalkers, that's a lot of Immortals, let me just max out on Zealots and this is going to be fine, I'm not going to build anything else, suddenly those Glaive Adepts might be reasonable. Now at this point it's a 0.0125 and it's getting worse and worse. Stalkers are going to get on top of everything. Our tiny dream is absolutely not a reality, even with Guardian Shield, even with everything else. ShoWTimE takes the expected result. Did have to work for a little bit in game one, but ShoWTimE, he moves on to the next round.
Yeah, this is one of these best of fives where in the end you'll look